welcome to Zoom Insight with another interesting story. Before start, subscribe to the channel for upcoming videos.
In a quiet village, there lived an old man named Mr. Thomas. He had lived in the village for many years, long before the trees and flowers had started to fade. His small garden, once a place of color and life, now lay dormant. The plants were wilting, the soil dry, and the flowers no longer bloomed. Mr. Thomas looked at his garden every day, but his smile had slowly faded away, just like his flowers. Every morning, he would sit in his rocking chair, staring out at the garden. It had once been his pride and joy. He had spent hours tending to it, watching it grow, and feeling happiness from the small buds that bloomed. But now, it seemed as though the world had forgotten how to bloom, just like his garden, and it made Mr. Thomas feel heavy inside. Mr. Thomas, it wasn't always like this. Once, this garden was full of life. Now, all I see are dry leaves and dead flowers. I don't know if I can fix it anymore. One day, as Mr. Thomas sat in his chair, a young traveler walked down the path beside his house. The traveler was full of energy, his eyes shining with curiosity about the world around him. When he saw Mr. Thomas sitting there, he waved and walked up to him. "Your young traveler." "Good morning, sir. You look like someone who has seen many beautiful things in his life. What's your name?" "Huh, Mr. Thomas?" "I'm Mr. Thomas. And yes, I've seen many things, too many to count. But lately, I only see the dullness of this old garden." The young traveler's eyes brightened even more, and he walked over to the garden with curiosity. He knelt down and examined the dry plants, touching the soil. He looked at Mr. Thomas with a warm smile. "Young traveler, this garden is amazing. It's full of history, isn't it? I can tell this place once had so much life. Why not try again? Maybe it just needs a little time and care. Mr. Thomas, I don't know if I have the strength anymore. I've tried and tried and tried, but it's too late. The garden is broken." The young traveler paused for a moment, then stood up with a thoughtful expression. "Young traveler, perhaps it's not about the garden being broken. Maybe it's about finding a way to heal it. Just like us, sometimes things need a little more time, a little more patience. You might be surprised what a little care can do." The young traveler smiled and reached into his bag. He pulled out a small seed wrapped in cloth. It was a tiny thing, hardly noticeable, but something about it seemed special. "Young traveler, take this. It's just a simple seed, but it has a lot of potential. It may seem small now, but with the right care, it could grow into something beautiful." Mr. Thomas took the seed and stared at it in his hand. It felt warm, almost like it was alive, and something deep inside him stirred. For the first time in a long while, he felt a spark of hope. He looked up at the young traveler, who was already starting to walk away. "Mr. Thomas, maybe it's not too late. Maybe I can try again." The next morning, Mr. Thomas woke early. The rain had stopped, and the clouds parted for the first time in days, allowing a few beams of sunlight to shine through. He stood in front of his garden, holding the seed in his hand, unsure if he should plant it. He thought back to the young traveler's words. "It's about patience," the traveler had said. "Things need care." With a deep breath, Mr. Thomas knelt down and began to dig a small hole in the soil. It was hard work, and his old bones creaked as he moved, but he didn't stop. Slowly, he placed the seed in the earth, covering it gently with the soil. For the first time in a long while, Mr. Thomas felt a sense of accomplishment, a small victory. The garden wasn't fixed yet, but it had taken its first step toward healing. Mr. Thomas, it may take time, but I believe it's worth the effort. I'll give this garden what it needs, just like I would take care of anything I love. Days turned into weeks, and Mr. Thomas kept tending to his garden. He watered the soil carefully, making sure each plant received attention. His hands were weathered and tired, but his heart felt lighter with each passing day. He knew that growth took time, but as the days passed, he saw no sign of change. The garden still looked barren, the flowers still absent. It was tempting to give up, to think that nothing would ever grow again. But Mr. Thomas remembered the young traveler's words. Sometimes things need a little more time. Mr. Thomas, it's okay. Just because I can't see the results right away doesn't mean it's not working. I just need to keep trying. Then, one morning, after many weeks of care, Mr. Thomas stepped outside and gasped. He could hardly believe his eyes. There, right in the middle of the garden, was the first flower he had seen in years. Its bright colors seemed to glow under the morning sun. It was a small flower, but to Mr. Thomas, it was a sign that the hard work had paid off. He knelt down beside the flower, feeling the soft petals with his fingers. A smile spread across his face. The garden wasn't fixed yet, but this was a beginning. The seed the traveler had given him had bloomed, just like his hope. Mr. Thomas, look, a flower! It's not much, but it's a start. Maybe things aren't so bad after all. As the seasons changed, Mr. Thomas continued to care for his garden. With each passing day, more flowers bloomed, and the soil grew richer. The garden became a place of beauty once more. The children in the village would come to play, laughing as they ran through the vibrant flowers. Mr. Thomas looked at his garden, his heart full of joy. It had taken time, patience, and care, but it had come back to life. He had found hope in the small seed, and that hope had helped him find his smile again. Mr. Thomas, sometimes we don't know how long it will take for things to get better, but with patience and care, even the hardest times can bloom into something beautiful. For more interesting stories, hit the subscribe button and bell icon button.